Oh, there you are, and here I am in the studio. But I did tell you this morning that I had a wonderful surprise. I am excited, and you'll find out why. Ladies and gentlemen, Ghana 4, I give you Bernice Abubedo Lanza.
You're making me feel so special. Thank you. Good morning to you. I've missed you all, yeah? It's good to be back.
Good to see you. Look what the net just dragged in. And she's my co-host, and we're going to be doing this together right here on the AM show. So you know what is coming.
It's worth waking up for, isn't it?
Charlie, thanks for joining. So let's do this. In the absence of the papers which have decided to go on holiday, we've also decided to go online and do a lot of stories. But some of these stories, I mean, they are captured on the news portals, but there are other things that we've also seen over the weekend. Let me just let all of you know that we'll also be joined by Suleiman Abraima via Zoom. He'll also be sharing his take. But what do you think about this entire TUC clock sag divide? You know, clock sag actually executed this threat. It ended up doing something on its own.
Yes.
All because they felt that, well, you think we don't, neutrality, allowance, and all of that. So there's a bit of a divide. I don't know how you feel that is going to affect the labor front. I don't know.
It's interesting. I wait to see what the days will bring. I mean, this is unfolding. And like you said, clock sag threatened and they executed the threat. So let's see how labor works this out. But it's interesting, you know, anytime there's a shift, sometimes it's for the good, sometimes it's not.
What do you think about this, though? Because they have said that it's not so much about the name.
Yeah.
They just wanted something with which to couch it. So it's not so much about neutrality, so to speak. It's just about the fact that, and if you look at what the TUC General Secretary is saying, Dr. Ba is saying that, give us 20% of our cost of living allowance. Because, and it makes sense, some of what they're calling for. You look at the fact that we have our minimum wage, and a liter of fuel is 80% of that minimum wage. Charlie.
So you
how are people going to get by?
How do you do the math?
A lot of these public sector workers, maybe 1,000, very few of them are at 1,800 or more. A lot of them are below. How are they going to, keep body and soul together?
Well, we wait to see, like I say. And then let me just take this opportunity to wish everybody a happy Workers' Day holiday. The day was yesterday, but we are all, we've been given some rest and it's important. So we'll be talking about these issues, delving deeper into it. And obviously, when you talk about workers, you talk about cost of living, you talk about expenses, you just have to mention the E-levy because it's the most talked about thing right now in the country, online, on air, on the ground, everywhere. Everybody's talking about E-levy. I know, right? So you'll be delving definitely with our guests. We'll be talking more about.
We're talking about it in the course of the news review as well. Have you tried, making a transaction?
Yes. So I used my bank app to transfer to someone's mobile money account. I just wanted to see how it worked there, but it was below 100 CDs. I did that because there've been concerns, and I've actually seen evidence of people who've been charged. Below the 100 CD.
For sending 10 CDs,
yes,
20 CDs,
below the 100
CDs.
CD threshold. So I wasn't charged anything, and I was excited about that. But then we see there's a lot of irregularities. So, I mean, people are experiencing different things. I don't know what the factor is. We will get some explanation.
It's not the algorithm that is not. And I don't know whether this vindicates Samjata George, member of Parliament for Limpopo, because he raised some of these concerns. But I also, on the other side, as a journalist, my curiosity was triggered. I have not done it myself. Honestly, prior to this, a lot of the money I had I used it for other things. So I have practically nothing in my mobile right now. But for those who were sending, some of them that you cannot confirm, they tell you I sent 20, 50. The problem is verifying that they had not sent 100 already.
Earlier, you're right.
Now, because whatever else you sent after 100.
That makes sense.
But there are people I also know from even in-house who sent, and we could confirm that they hadn't sent up to 100 already, and they were facing these problems. So it's
and
a
even
bit
someone who claims he sent for his accounts on different networks. He had registered with his Ghana card, and so it should identify him as the same person, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes.
When I was interacting with Dr. Kuma, the Deputy Finance Minister last week, he did mention that as of now, maybe until July, when there is more regularization and the telcos fully integrate, you'll be facing some of these challenges so that if you have you're on 3 different telcos and all of them are on mobile money. If you send, let's say, 30 from here and 40 from there and another, let's say, 35, the 5 CDs will be hit likely because the system identifies you as
different people.
Exactly, sort of. So
then again, the question arises: were we ready for this? Were we really ready for this?
What do you think? On the back of all that you've seen, were we ready?
Well, it's early days yet, but based on some of the concerns that have come up, you'd have expected that people were not in favor of this at all. So
and
when you roll it out,
sometimes we pretend, just as we did with the district level, the local level elections. People said we are for the elections, but not for the politics of it, not for political parties. Same here. I feel it was pretty clear, no matter what anyone tries to paint for us. It was pretty clear where the people stood when it came to the E-levy. It was clear.
So once the people kicked against it, there was mass protest. People were online. People were trying to get signatures, to prevent the E-levy from being implemented. So once you decide to go ahead, you should start off on a good note.
Right.
Do you get my point?
Some of these. But even as we say that, is it also practical to expect that of the system? Because it's a system that needs fine-tuning. We are now starting.
So I was discussing this with a call earlier, and I said, well, I know that could be a reason we're given that, some of these things, we need to roll it out, and then we'll find some of the loopholes and then fine-tune it. But let's see how it goes. But I'm told we have Suleiman Brahma with us. Hello, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Mr. Brahma.
Hello.
Okay, now we can hear you. And if you're hearing that sweet voice in the background, it is the voice of Bernice Abubeidu-Lanta. I'm sure you've not seen her in a while. She is on the show with me this morning. Happy holiday to you and happy Eid in advance, Sule.
Thank you very much for having me and happy Eid to all Muslim colleagues. We thank Allah for how far He's brought us.
Great. So, today we don't have the papers. It's a holiday as expected. But we've decided to go online. One issue that is trending is the E-levy. Have you tried sending anyone money on any of the electronic platforms since yesterday? And what has your experience been?
Well, I did yesterday a couple of times. I needed to reach out to a few friends and family people. And on all occasions, the tax was applied. So I think that in my experience, and it also because I was sending something a little more than the 100 threshold, it worked in a way that I wouldn't say there were technical issues. But of course, I've also come across people who have said that they were trying to send less than 100 and had a tax applied to them contrary to what the expectations are in terms of the threshold. And so, and I did say some time ago that if the tax was going to be implemented on May 1, given the circumstances of lack of public education and all of that, I did expect that there will be confusion and chaos. And I think that, of course, maybe chaos, it's maybe on the higher side in terms of violent scenes and all of that. But in terms of confusion, I think what we've seen so far is exactly what one would expect to happen. The public education was not there. People who are merchants don't even understand what, the system is, how the system is going to operate, whether it's when you are withdrawing or when you are sending. I think
I just to interject, I saw a communication from the mobile money agents nationwide, their association, pointing to the fact that the agents shouldn't take the 1.5% because it is automatic. Some people were actually thinking, and the agents themselves didn't have a proper understanding of it.
Exactly. I think that all the town halls that were being organized was mainly for the political buy-in rather than public education on what the E-levy is all about, how it would work in terms of how it would affect individual transactions. But I think that as we go along, we would see how people are going to react ultimately. Because if you think of it, it's really something that comes down to double, triple, quadruple taxation. And I think that it makes it quite very, very obnoxious, particularly for those of us who, at the end of the month, have to pay our income tax. And then beyond that, whatever comes to you as net, if you are sending a part of that to your mother, to your father, then you pay tax on it again. If your mother, your father is sending part of what you send to them to other friends or relatives, they have to pay tax on that again. I think that we need to really have a proper conversation about this, because the way it is, I don't think it's a tax that is really fair.
And if I may top up, I do not know, but I'm sure you know of actress Yvonne Nelson. She says, she's been posting on social media, she says Ghanaians were lured into voting for the president with his big English. I don't shy away from, controversial stuff. But she focuses on the fact that the E-levy is a slap in the face of the ordinary Ghanaian. And like you're saying, it would appear that with one sum of money, you could be taxed back, forward, side, top, bottom. Do you agree with her?
Well, I agree with the bit about the tax and how obnoxious it is in terms of how it can just be, doing multiple, it's really about multiple taxation. So you're going to buy fuel and you want to pay with mobile money, and you have to pay tax on that. On top of that, there are taxes on our fuel, and the money that you are using is really about the net, whatever you've earned after government's taxes from your salary. The other thing is that, so my sister is a trader at the market, and then if she wants to maybe buy something from Tamale or buy something from Ijura or wherever, what it means is that consistently his income, his capital is what is going to be taxed. I think that there ought to have been a mechanism to ensure that the tax would apply to persons who generate income and yet do not pay taxes to the government. I think that everyone needs to pay tax, so long as you earn some income, whether you're a plumber, electrician, a tiler, a mechanic, whatever it is. I think that ought to have been the target. Those who earn income and yet they're having no mechanism to pay income tax. But the way it is now, it's quite obnoxious. But in terms of the other comments about the president having lured people to vote for him with big English, I think that is a very political comment. And from the experience so far, I think that perhaps as a people in this country, we need to begin to have a very, very big conversation, a serious debate about the kind of governance we want to have. Because over the years, I don't think that we have experienced the kind of governance that this country must have. And it's not enough to say that, look, the previous government was better, this one is worse, and so on. Otherwise, what we are saying is, oh, well, what we had was better, therefore, let's have that back. And even if they continue to do what they did in terms of the levels of corruption, in terms of the mismanagement and all of that, which we are also experiencing now, except that people expected better governance. People expected President Akufo-Addo to do better. People expected so much of the MPP government.
Did you, you keep using the impersonal term, people, did you expect more from him as well? Are you disappointed?
I am very, very disappointed. In fact, people have said time and again to me, anytime I raise concerns, that, oh, please shut up, because you were among those who were, bitterly complaining under the Mahama regime.
Right.
You did a lot to bring the Mahama government down. I am not sure, because I don't think that I have that much power. But people think, well, we did whatever to contribute, or some of us did whatever to contribute to the downfall or the defeat of the Mahama regime. And so, yes, I did have great expectations. I thought President Akufo-Addo, the experience he had what we were told about his human rights track record, his incorruptibility, and so on and so forth, we were going to see a complete departure of the kind of governance that we had. But, I mean, it's been an extreme disappointment. In some cases, I think that it's been worse. In terms of corruption, we know the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, and so far the record indicates that the worst performance of President Mahama has been the best performance of Akufo-Addo on issues of corruption. I am extremely disappointed when it comes to fundamental rights, particularly free expression and media freedom rights. And then, of course, the economy. We all had expectations that President Bawumia knew a lot about what this country needed. He had a lot of solutions. It turns out the solutions were in words, in flowery language. And what we're going through, of course, isn't better than what we had before.
Talking about the economy and how much people have to pay now for services and goods, brings to mind what we've been seeing, especially on the labor front. I mean, we've seen a lot of agitation recently. And the agitation is now gone beyond the demand for better salaries and wages. There appears to be some confusion brewing among, the various groups, TUC, CLOCSAG, especially over this neutrality allowance issue. Now, CLOCSAG threatened to hold a separate event because TUC was not in agreement with what they were seeking. And yesterday they carried that out. Let's just, your thoughts on what this could mean for the future of labor in terms of, coming together, marshalling forces, fighting for what they believe is due them.
Well, I think that labor is right in the demands that they are making. At some point in our history, something was introduced called the Fair Wages and Salaries Commission. And by its name, I believe what we intended was to ensure that the little that we have is shared in a fair manner when it comes to wages and salaries. But I think that we've continued to see the big dichotomy in terms of what happens to a certain class of appointees and what happens to the people who are laboring for this country. If you look at teachers, you look at nurses, you look at the group that belong to CLOCSAG and how much they are earning versus how much someone gets to earn once they get an appointment by the president, you wonder whether we have two Ghanas, and one Ghana having some great resources to pay a certain class of people at a certain rate. And another Ghana.
And even, pardon the interjection, Suleimana, but even as you mentioned this, it is topical and important. It's been mentioned that some CEOs of even underperforming or poorly performing SOEs are earning 3 times what Mr. President gets. The question is, on what basis? I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
Yeah, you see, I think that's in principle right, but in practice, sometimes I really wouldn't go for that bait when people say, oh, they've cut down their salary by whatever. Look, we are running a system where people really don't care about what their salaries are. Look, do you think if the president were to say, look, going forward, no minister is going to be paid salary for 1 year, you think ministers will resign? How many ministers will resign? So that should tell you, look, people are not dependent on their salaries. Why do you think that people will resign from certain lucrative private, businesses and private employment to jump into government employment, and then we are told, oh, the salary for where they are going now is about 1/3 of what they were earning? That should tell you that people are grabbing positions, not just the salary, but the opportunities that are there for them to also get involved in acts that will let them get sometimes in one contract, perhaps 10 times or 20 times what they would get in terms of their salary. And so, yes, CEOs, some CEOs are earning far more than the president, but whether or not, those CEOs can fly in chartered, luxurious flights around the world, and spend how much is spent for these travels and so on is another matter. Whether or not those people can afford, to travel with these long convoys with a chair in one of the, V8s and so on and so forth is another matter. So I think that we need to be very real.
All right.
We need
so Mr. Brima, to the question, what does this mean for the future, the labor front? Because we're seeing that this issue of neutrality allowance is creating some confusion even among the worker unions.
And if I may just add to what she says, the likes of Dr. Stephen Ade have said that this is the most stupid thing they have ever heard. That's, I'm quoting him, Professor Ade, and that is what he says. So is it? I don't know how it rubs off you, but just to add that.
Well, I think that the term is quite funny, and to think that there are government workers who say, because we are not allowed to do politics, we need something called neutrality allowance. I think they deserve more. If you learn about how much they earn, they certainly deserve more. But whether that should come in the form of neutrality allowance is where the issue is. I think that is an unrealistic term. That would be an unrealistic allowance, and therefore, even as they need to have more, they need to look at how they negotiate for better increment and all of that. And so if Professor Adai says what he said, I think it's in principle about the term rather than their demand for more. Because in terms of fairness and equity, indeed, they need more. If CEOs running organizations into debts are being paid tens of thousands of cedis a month, then the people running our local governance system certainly deserves better than what they are having.
Mr. Brima, on that same bit about labor, we heard from the General Secretary of the TUC make mention of the fact that, look, our minimum wage is just about 80% of a liter of fuel. 1 liter of fuel is 80% of our minimum wage. So imagine someone who's on minimum wage. What can the person do with that? The president, in response, says, but it is what it is. We are in this situation. Dr. Ba says, scrap all the taxes on petroleum products. And by the way, we are told that LPG prices are going to drop, but the prices of petrol, the prices of diesel are going up again. So we're going to have to pay even more than we are seeing at the pumps now. You put that side by side with what Mr. President says, that we can't do that because we get some 4 billion from there. I mean, what is your take? Where do we strike the balance? Because ordinary people out there say they are suffering.
Well, indeed, the suffering is real. I think we are all going through. And if you want to be honest with yourself, you would say, look, if I'm earning 2,000 or 3,000 and I'm going through this kind of suffering, how about the person who is earning 700 or 800 a month? So that's real. And I think that when the president says that is what it is or that is what it has to be, I share a different opinion. I think it is what the president has made it to be. It is what the president has made it to be because, look, I mean, why would we be running this country with this size of economy with 100 or sometimes more than 100 ministers? With all the perks that goes to ministers, everyone has to have a V8, fueled by the state, driven by someone paid by the state, with free accommodation, electricity, water, telephone, and so on and so forth. What is special about those people? Beyond the fact that they are MPP members whose party is in power and they get appointed by the president. What is so unique? What is so special about those people? So if we are suffering, let us suffer together. If the economy can pay people fairly, let us pay ourselves or pay people fairly. Why would we run this government machinery that is consuming so much when people are suffering? Why do we pay so much to state CEOs running organizations that are not contributing really anything to the development and growth of our country? Is it because, they are party members, they contributed to a party and they must enjoy? And so for me, it is what the president and the government of the day has made it to be, rather than what it has to be. And the equity, the fairness is something that we need to have a look at it. The other day, the president talked about our democracy being threatened. I think these are some of the fundamentals that then threaten our democracy. When inequality is rising, when people are seriously suffering, whilst others are really enjoying, it comes down to confrontations, agitations, public debates, and so on, which then undermine the progress of our democracy.
Once we're talking about this, let me just share an experience. There's this Uber I used, and the driver was so upset. We were listening to the radio, and they were discussing these issues of unemployment. And he shares with me his story that a colleague of his got a government appointment and is putting up 3 structures in a prime area in this country. And he asks, within 3 or 4 years, why should he have that much? And the issue of the neutrality allowance, backs this assertion that if you want to get rich quicker, then work for a party, work to bring a government into power, and then you get an appointment that will, catapult you to the next phase of your life. And so this demand by labor then also adds to the whole assertion and gives it some credence that, well, if you want to be rich, then become a politician. How do we change the story?
Well, I think that we essentially would need a leader who, comes in and would want to change the dynamics, revolutionize how governance have been done in this country over the last 30 years or so, and to say, look, we need to build this country, and to build this country, we need to, relook at how we have done things. We cannot continue on the path where people finance a political party, and when they come to power, then what they have to do is to, reward themselves. We need to look at how contracts are being awarded. And we know about contracts that are, for example, take fumigation during COVID. It was really a contract to make people rich and to make people just squeeze resources from our state. Because what are we fumigating against? Are we better at fumigating than, let's say, China, than Spain, than Italy, where a lot of people were dying? They had the resources, they had the capacity to do better than we are doing.
I guess it raises questions as well, like some have asked about COVID-19 spending.
Exactly. I mean, the transparency that is required, we are lacking it. And for me, it all comes down to leadership. And let us, as Ghanaians, be bold to speak truth to power. I think that is what develops a country. Let us, as Ghanaians, not be selfish. Don't let us look at, if I say this against the MPP, an opportunity that could have come my way would be missed. If I say this against the NDC, an opportunity that could come my way when they are in power would be missed. If we do that, I don't think that we would be helping the development of this country. And people have said, as civil society organizations and as journalists, you need to demonstrate neutrality. Yes, that is true. But what is neutrality? I don't believe that neutrality is about watching on when state resources are being plundered, watching on when taxes that are so obnoxious are being imposed, when people are cooking figures, and Auditor General reports year on year indicates that billions are going into the pockets of people. And then you watch on in the name of neutrality. I don't think that will be neutrality. That will be condoning, what is happening. And until we, especially those of us who would call ourselves young, middle-aged, or whatever, begin to speak truth to power, I believe that we would continue to see what we are seeing. NDC would come one day and they may do worse. MPP would win again and they would continue to do worse. So what would get us to change the status quo is for us as citizens to begin to speak truth to power, say things as they are, and be real, and forget about being afraid that one will be tagged, you are not neutral, you are not independent, you are MPP, you are NDC, and so on and so forth. That is what will help this country.
But someone will say, what has talking done for us? I mean, just think about the E-levy, for example, on online, you know, on radio, on television, everywhere. People registered
We
their
conducted
displeasure.
polls, Bernice, in the Ashanti region, where 9 out of 10 people said they were against it. Here we are.
And still, you know, government found a way to pass it, to have it implemented. So, I mean, talking truth to power, do you think that alone can help us change the status quo?
Well, the implementation has started. They have found their way. We had our say, but they had their way. Now, they promised us that with E-levy, schools will be built. You know, children sitting under trees will not happen anymore. Our roads will be tiled. Unemployment would be a thing of the past, and so on. Yes, they've had their way. Let us now demand what they promised that E-levy would do. We know very well that, as usual, they were deceiving the people. They were, you know, trying to say whatever it is that will get the people to buy in. Unfortunately, on this occasion, people did not buy in. People had their say, they had their way, but they promised us. Let us continue to demand. I believe that the transformation we all look for, the good governance that we are lacking, we will not have it in a day. But certainly, if we continue to persist, one day we would have a leader who would say, look, the people are now well aware of their rights, well aware of their, you know, their responsibilities, and well aware of what they have to do as citizens. And we cannot continue to take them for granted. If we want this country to continue to run in the peaceful manner that we have had over the years, I don't think that the way to go is for government to always abuse its power, have its way, and continue to perpetrate the fraudulent things that we have always seen over the years. Let's continue to have our way. Let's continue to speak truth to power. If for nothing at all, that is what brings government down and brings government in. And those who may come may know that they came to power not because people liked them, but because people hated what their predecessors were doing. And therefore, if they continue to do what their predecessors did, they would certainly also be kicked out, just as their predecessors were kicked out. This whole phenomenon of when are we going to have a situation where a government comes to power and in 4 years they are out of power? I think one day we'll get to that point where governments will realize it is no longer 8 years. If for nothing at all, what happened in 2020, I believe, was a signal. To have had, you know, the parliament that we have now certainly is a signal that the people are well awake, and politicians and people in leadership cannot take them for granted forever.
Suleimana, do tell, there's an interesting dynamic to this because we're talking about leadership. And on the back of Elon Musk taking over Twitter and all of that, he posted recently, you know him, he throws a lot of jokes out there, but you never know what he's serious about. And he posted that he was going to buy Coca-Cola and put the cocaine, so to speak, back. And per what I've heard, some 3.5 grams of cocaine was actually in the first bottle of, but no longer. So Coca-Cola, don't come after me. But that is what Elon posted. Then we had a prominent citizen, Dr. Kofi Amwa, Citizen Kofi, come and retort that, oh, Elon, I have a better idea. Come and buy Africa and delete all our leaders. Delete them. What do you think? It brings to mind what Mo Ibrahim said some time back about leadership of a certain type and even the age. And I'm not being ageist here, but it's the reality. You look at France and the age, even now, in a second term of their leader, and so many other countries. And he asks, where are leaders taking us? To the grave? I don't know. Just for you to digest.
Well, first of all, in terms of the age debates, the last time I was having an argument with someone and the person said, I don't think that, in quotes, I don't think that we have to vote for an old person again. And my question was, who is old? President Mahama, at the time he assumed office, wasn't somebody that we would describe as old, but did we have the kind of leadership that we deserved as a country from him? My answer would be no. He could have done far better. And so I don't think that it comes down to the question of age. I think it is about someone who has a determination to leave a legacy, to want to be remembered for great things that he did. and not to be remembered as somebody who also came and just basically did what others had to do. In terms of the very maybe jovial comment that Elon should buy Africa and delete our leaders, well, I think that was just for joke. But look, you and I know that the kind of effort that people put in to be able to travel out of this country to the West, it has given people cause to say, look, if all of a sudden we wake up one day and we hear, oh, there are ships on the shores and they are looking for slaves to America and so on and so forth, look, people would voluntarily say, we would want to be in the US.
Suleimana, don't go too far. On the back of what is happening between Ukraine and Russia, some people have queued. I'm sure you are aware.
Yes.
And not just in Ghana.
Yes.
In other countries, Kenya and others, wanting to leave our continent for those countries.
And that should tell us a lot. And if our leaders are genuine, if our leaders would want to be remembered as we remember leaders like Kwame Nkrumah for what they did over a 6-year period or so, and then we have had leaders who stay in power for 8 years, they leave, and you have really nothing to remember them for their leadership. If at all, it is just about all the trivialities of how many schools have been built and how many hospitals have been built, rather than the transformational things. Kwame Nkrumah, who talks about how many schools Nkrumah built and so on and so forth as his record. It is about the kinds of things that he puts in place that become so transformational. When you build schools, every government builds schools, and these days, I believe that every minister would want to execute projects sometimes for what comes with it. Because, without that, is it your salary that you're going to depend on, and so on and so forth. Right. So I think that leaders in Africa must reflect. When they meet together, they must reflect and ask themselves.
Ooh, too bad.
Too bad. It appears the feed there. I have to do this before we go. So there's someone watching, Martin George, and he says, wow, I love your beautiful madam. I can't stop watching her. Martin George, yes, she is her pulchritude, but she's also very married.
All right. Before we go on to do sports, let me just mention that the president, during his address yesterday to workers, mentioned that the Ministry of Employment and Labour Relations has set up a technical committee to look into the single spine.
How long will we look into that spine before we get into that?
I know, right?
that particular boom that is giving us.
So he's saying that they need answers as to whether the policy should be maintained or there should be. So that's just by way of information. But we have Suleimana Brahima back. Sorry, we lost you there, sir. So just quickly wrap up on what you were saying.
Yes, just to wrap up on this whole issue about salaries and all, I think it's really unfair that we live in a country where people get into politics, be in parliament, and for every 4 years, they get fat as gracias and go away with. And I have,
it appears we've lost the feed again. So we have to go for sports. But this story on the BBC caught my attention, just to wrap. Children drank rainwater from puddles to survive. That is in Ukraine. And I was just thinking, while we, feel for them, this is a normal, regular situation in Niaweni, in the eastern region and other parts of the country. You have people drinking muddy water. And that is something we really ought to look at 64 years after independence.
Too bad. I mean, I don't like talking about these things, especially when you travel to the northern parts of the country. It's very disheartening. Like Suleimana was asking, you wonder if people live in a different Ghana. I think that it's something that people should try to do. And I mean, quickly linked to that also is how, as a country, we don't do a lot to maintain our resources. For those of us who are down south, people open their taps, use water anyhow. In the UK, for example, there's effort to preserve water. And so when you buy products, you see it labeled there, and like, you know, things that will require that you use water, like even a common toothpaste, they write it there, save water, use water, you know, judiciously. So
even suggesting that you can do the brushing without water
and then rinse your mouth. So I just think that we as a people should be, you know, should concentrate more on the things that matter. You know, human dignity. It's important. How do people drink water that's not treated? I don't know, for some time now, the water is getting better. Ghana Water Company Limited. Initially, it was terrible. Terrible. The quality of water we were getting served. But now I see, even when you open the taps, you smell that there are chemicals in it now. There's some treatment. So,
but it's also on the back of Galamsey, and it's making them use even more chemicals. But I do agree.
What happened to that fight?
You know, it brings to mind the expression, penny wise, pound foolish.
What happened to the fight against Galamsey?
Should I tell you? Do I even know?
Let's go and do some sports.
Let's get into sports. We'll be back.